No Cap Sports. What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Josh Crawford. I'm going to kick things off with the Big 12 conference because they had a ranked-on-ranked matchup with two of the better quarterbacks in the country. I believe go check out my top 10 quarterback rankings over on Mother Gig, Baylor on that side. So, yeah, we'll get it going with probably the most unpredictable conference in major college football. I need to tell you nothing more than this. Arizona State, your playoff representative from last year, was picked 16th, last in the previous poll last year. I think that was such a bad selection that I don't think the Big 12 even does preseason polls. With Shadur leaving, with Travis Hunter leaving, I think those are the two most talented guys. Those were the two most talented guys in the conference. And, there's a void that I don't think Colorado would necessarily be able to fill. And it just adds to the unpredictable nature of the conference. We'll go from top to bottom. Best teams, contenders to the bottom feeders. Sorry, Houston. Sorry, Oklahoma State. Sorry, Rich Rod, West Virginia. Not a lot to talk about there. I am excited to see my boy Pat White back in West Virginia. They probably need him on the field, but I digress. So let's get into these teams, these rundowns. Obviously, your head honcho, Arizona State. I think if Jordan Tyson is available, I believe that they actually beat Texas in that double overtime thriller to start college football, the college football playoff last year as a 4 seed, and Texas being a 5 seed, if I'm not mistaken. Sam Levitt, a legitimate Heisman candidate, a guy that will probably be a first-round pick, top 10 pick in the 2027 NFL draft, but could potentially be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL draft. If you watched a little bit of my quarterback discussion with Ryan Roberts over at our live stream on No Cap, Sam Levitt, man, probably one of the most fun watches in college football. A lot of Baker Mayfield in terms of just a lot of neat crates outside of the pocket, big time arm, questionable decision making, but undoubtedly the best watch in the conference and one of the best watches in college football. Preseason player of the year, and if it wasn't going to be him, it was probably going to be Jordan Tyson, who is probably the best receiver in the country, not named Jeremiah Smith. So from a talent standpoint, I think that those two, again, are probably in a situation like Colorado, so where you got a quarterback receiver duo is also concurrently the best two players in the conference. And their schedule is not super heavy in terms of teams that we'll talk about a little bit later, like TCU. They got some big-time matchups. So I think that with the schedule that Arizona State has and the weapons they have, now they do got to replace some of the auxiliary production around Jordan Tyson. Xavier Guillory is in the NFL now. Cam Skattebo is in the NFL, honestly. I think that that'll be the big step for them to see if Sam Levitt can handle being one on the scouting report week in and week out, because he'll still be a sophomore this year, but he was a freshman last year doing all that. And like I mentioned, the decision making he got away with because most teams were focused on loading the box and making sure that Skattebo didn't go off. So that would be an interesting development for me to track. But I think that this is the best team in the conference. This is probably one of the only things that we know about this conference. I think that if they play up to their standards, and we got to see how Army transfer Kanye Adua, that's a name, boy. You got to see how he assimilates to the offense. But Kenny Dillingham is really building a program out there in Arizona. I just think that that's a guy. He comes from, it's crazy, the Dan Lanning tree. So I think that we see what Dan Lanning has been able to do is stop in Georgia and stop in Oregon. Now, I think this is the foundation of a really good program, and I expect, at the very least, Arizona State to make back-to-back appearances in the conference championship. From here, we'll go to the best team in the conference, or probably the most expensive team in the conference, Texas Tech. Now, if somebody lives in Texas right now, you know that there's not a lot that goes on in the panhandle in Lubbock, Texas, but where it's going on. But Texas Tech has completely revamped their roster in terms of going all in on being the biggest spenders in college football. And it reflects in their roster. They got a bunch of high-level transfers. I think they have the second highest rated transfer class in the country. They got a solid starting quarterback in Bryn Morton, which with all the money they spent in the portal, they did not decide to go get a quarterback, which leads me to believe that Jordan McGuire of Texas high school fame believes that Bryn Morton is a guy that can lead this team to wherever the team needs to go. Now, something that recently came out that severely dampens the ceiling on the Red Raiders season, Quinn Joyner, a USC transfer, one of the gems of their transfer portal class, and a guy that totaled over 500 yards, I think 5 or 6 touchdowns at USC last year. I believe he tore his ACL. So that is just a horrible blow for them that honestly may knock them down a tier a little bit. But with all the production they got out of the portal, and again, I believe that football is still a quarterback game for the most part. Bryn Morton, he's good, not great, but he's a guy that, for the most part, will not take you out of games. Is where his decision making and will keep you in games. With the Texas Tech noted air raid system. Yeah, so I think that's a situation where we got to see about some of these big time transfers, how they paying David Bailey, Romello Height, all of these guys. But I do think Texas taking this position to surprise some people. Maybe not even surprise. A lot of people know about the spending they've been doing. They've been one of the worst power programs in Texas for a long time. I think they have an opportunity to change that soon. And I just have to see. It'll be a fascinating case study to talk about whether or not purely spending dollar for dollar means you'll be good on the field. Again, we'll see if the talent and all the pieces they brought can congeal and become a team. But undoubtedly, a team in the conference that can knock you off at any game, any Friday. We'll go from new hot shot of the town to probably the most consistent program in the conference. Kansas State. Kansas State, in an age of college football that there's no such thing as continuity, it's lovely to see a guy like Chris Klieman, a guy like Avery Johnson that had ample opportunity to transfer, for him to come back and really try to establish a foundation and turn Kansas State into a power program. And Kansas State has had success before, but it's just nice to see a real brand in college football in a way that is kind of lacking. Now, Avery Johnson is a freshman starting or filling in for his bowl game. Had a lot of hype in terms of what he could do in his first time years in his first 4 years as a starter. Really dynamic guy with his legs. Has to be a better thrower of the football. Completed under 60% of his passes, I believe, last year. I think he threw double-digit interceptions as well. But just in general, he's a guy that, your typical boomer bust type of guy. It's a situation where he can keep you in games with his legs and his playmaking outside of the pocket, but he can also throw you out of some games and just not be as consistent as you need to be. Because you're not going to win a lot of games when your quarterback is struggling to complete half his passes. So I will say that just the way that the consistency of that program, they're gonna walk out and get 7-8 wins. We got to see in terms of the schedule what it looks like for them if they can get some of these harder road wins. Now their schedule, looking at it, it doesn't look too bad. I think they get some of their tougher games in the Little Apple. Shout out Manhattan. But the key for them will be Avery Johnson. Can you make a jump? And can you make a jump as a guy that's a theoretically good quarterback, an exciting watch to a guy that can be a top 2, top 3 quarterback in this conference? He has the talent to be the best quarterback in the conference. If he can prove that with his play on the field, Kansas State could be knocking on the door of a conference championship appearance. But if not, it could be a situation where it would be slightly disappointing to not see them fully flesh out the talent that they got around them. Him, Chase Brown, all those guys. Now to my beats. Baylor Bears. Baylor had one of the most interesting turnarounds of last season. We saw the perils, the perils of the transfer portal, the new age of college football. DeQuan Finn, big-time free agency acquisition, did not end up being good for them. The team got out to a 2-4 start. They put him on the bench. Now he's at Miami of Ohio. But Sawyer Robertson, one of the last quarterbacks that Mike Leach handpicked at Mississippi State before his passing, RP Mark Leach, stepped in and looked to be one of the better, more experienced returnees in college football. I think it's like one of 3 or 4 guys that had a over 80 QBR at the end of last season. And I said it before on my podcast, my live with Shahan over at Baylor SI. Check that out. There may be 2 games this year where Baylor can't consistently say we'll be able to say they're not going to have the edge in the quarterback matchup. So I think for me, their schedule will also be a big deal for them. They start off with a big time game against Auburn, which is Auburn. They're underachieved. But we'll have to see if, Jackson Arnold, Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, all those boys can strike lightning in the bottle. And I will say talent for talent, Auburn probably has a more talented roster than Baylor. They get Auburn at home. They go to Dallas to play SMU, which they'll probably be a little worse than last year, but it's still a playoff team. And one of the only other games where I think they may be at a disadvantage at quarterback with Kevin Jennings. Then in week 4, they come back and play Arizona State. So I think for me, Baylor's first 4 games of their season, because Sanford's in there week 3, hopefully they'll knock that out. I think the first 4 games of Baylor's season should really be a telltale in terms of what they look like and what they should look like the rest of the season. But yeah, Sawyer Robinson, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Bryson Washington, one of the best young backs in the country, broke out as a freshman with a 1,000-yard season. The receiver room was a little shaky before they got Ashton Hawkins back, a 6-year senior transfer from Texas State. They just have to improve on defense. They couldn't really stop anybody through the air, and they struggled to defend the run. So, and I know that drives Dave Aranda crazy. Haven't talked to him about it. So they can take some legitimate steps in the defense. I think this is an offense that can go blow for blow for anybody in the conference. These teams I'm talking about in this upper crust right now is another team that if they can get through week 1, coming out 3-1, I think that they'll have a good shot at anybody to be ranked, probably top 15, top 20, and yeah, being able to consider themselves playoff contenders. Now, Iowa State, I feel that they're right on this cusp between playoff contenders and upper middle tier of the conference. Obviously, a program record 11 wins in 2024, but you lose you lose your top 2 receivers to NFL. Jalen. Matt Campbell has proven himself to be a really good college coach, but I just worry about the talent that's going to be around Rocco Becht. And I think last year he was a little bit of a kind of a best kept secret. Shout out Baller's Life, but it will not be that this year. So I'm interested to see how they will look. Their schedule is a bit tougher too. The defense returns a few pieces that they should be healthier, but I have Rocco Becht at number 2, the second best quarterback in the conference. He'll probably shoulder as big a load as any guy in the conference, just based on, I don't say expectations, but based on what the team did last year, based on him having eligibility to potentially move on in the portal if he chooses to do so. Again, kind of a similar situation like Kansas State. When is the next time do you think a guy as talented as Rocco Becht will be at the helm for multiple seasons in Ames? So that'll be an interesting situation. Like I said, high end for them, potential playoff scenario, potential playoff contender. But for my money, I don't really expect to see them where they were last year in terms of appearing in the conference championship game. But you never know. You never know. The quarterback that they have, it could be a situation where Rocco Becht could be he could be in New York at the end of the year, and he could will them to wins. He could will them to 19 wins. So you'd rather be in that position than not be in that position. Going a little bit towards the middle crust of the conference, Utah. Kyle Whittingham is just one of my favorite, ethos in college football. We're going to be tough. We're going to be physical. I know they're trying to legislate that out of football, but the smash mouth football that he plays with, I love it. And it kind of reflects itself in the personnel this year. Got a guy, Devon Dampier, not a great thrower of football, but very electric with his legs, over 1,100 yards on the ground coming from New Mexico. And you got 2 potential first-round tackles, booking tackles, Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano. So we know what Utah's going to try to do. We're going to beat you up in the trenches. We're going to run the ball really well. Our quarterback is going to be one of the most dynamic options he has. And hopefully bringing over Jason Beck, Dampier's offensive coordinator from New Mexico, to pair with him, will also be able to revitalize the offense and revitalize a program that had its first losing season in a decade. So for my money, like I said, definitively in the mid-tier of the conference, Dampier, very much a boom or bust type of situation. I just love the way that Kyle Whittingham coaches football, develops a football program. We see Utah consistently punch above its weight in terms of these big games. And yeah, if Dampier can take a step as a passer, if this defense can, like I said, that's the only thing. How consistently are they going to be able to create points? Yeah, like I said, if he takes a step as a passer, this offense finds some continuity outside of the offensive line, I see a situation to where, yeah, they could be top 3, top 4 in the conference. Now, do I foresee that? Probably not. But this is probably the end of the teams to where I see a situation to where they could really, really, really push as playoff contenders in the right film. Get into the lower middle tier of the conference. BYU, really good season last year, 11 games and a bowl victory. Jake Rosloff, yeah, buddy, you got to keep your hands to yourself, especially at BYU. Now, going from Utah to New Orleans, I definitely think will be a culture shock for him. Anyways, they just named the 5-star freshman Bear Bachmeier as a starter. Unless this kid is going to be super cold out the gate, I don't have high expectations for him in terms of being able to lead them to like playoff contention or even, 8-9 wins, honestly. But the talent is there. But another thing with BYU, they're going to be replacing a ton of depth on the offensive and defensive line. So they got a high upside kid at quarterback. There's also a program that's traditionally known to be able to batter and bruise you in the trenches. So they may have some trench guys that we don't know about, but you don't have the proven experience of a Utah coming back. So this is, like I said, definitely in the mid-tier. All their games were close last year. The only 2 losses they had was by a total of 9 points. But I kind of see them more in a Kansas vein to where, like, they may struggle to come out of the gate, but this is a team that people may sleep on if their record doesn't look like how it usually does in the middle of the season. But they will also probably have a puncher's chance against anybody in the conference. TCU, Texas Christian University. Josh Hoover almost nearly threw for 4,000 yards last year and 27 touchdowns. I think that the numbers are slightly better than the tape for him. Because he's a situation where, like, yeah, those are great numbers, but you don't really see him in a lot of NFL draft discussions. He can be a little whatever with the ball. And honestly, the college quarterback conversion, the NFL conversion, I think I had him at like six or seven middle of my list. No, I think he's close to like 3 or 4. But he's just not a guy that, in terms of talent-wise or like best-case scenario guys, I think that he probably more close to that 4th list by the time of quarterback play. They also have a pretty tough schedule. They will be welcoming Bill Belichick and Jordan Hudson to college football, so that will be a show, and that's in Durham, in North Carolina. So that'll be a high-stakes game. They playing at Arizona State, at Kansas State, and at BYU. We know Provo, even if they're down, tough place to play. Hell of a road trip too. So I think between the schedule, as I'm just not as high on Josh Hoover as a lot of people are. And then the loss of Savion Williams, I just think that, I don't see them. A lot of people have them a little up close to the top of the conference, 3-4. I don't see it for them. The defense did improve last year. But I think there's a lot more. I think there's at least solidly 4 more talented teams in the conference than TCU. So, I think that they'll probably be in a situation where they're more so fighting for bowl eligibility than truly contending. But I could be wrong. Got out most of the relevant teams in the conference. Kansas, Jalen Daniels had a lot of hype. Not so much anymore, struggled to stay healthy. And when he did stay healthy, did not look like the guy that broke onto the scene as a potential Heisman candidate. Lance Leipold, man, it's a blessing the way he got that Kansas program anyways, because they used to suck. They're replacing a lot of their defense. They'll be relying on transfers as well. And again, in the age of Kansas football, they'll probably be fighting for bowl eligibility. We saw what they did down the stretch of last year. 3 ranked wins, I think it was at the end of last year. But they'll probably be in a similar situation where they'll have to be fighting for a puncher's chance versus being true contenders. Oklahoma State, it's crazy the state that Oklahoma State program is in now. Mike Gundy might be your last rodeo, buddy. 0-9 in conference last year. I think Mike Gundy's been there over 26 years. That's his last year, and his first year was the first 2 years he's had a losing record. Yeah, man, I don't got nothing for it. I just hope Mike Gundy, legend in college football, if he had another year even similar to that, he's going to get fired. West Virginia, let us see Rich Rod back in the roots. They're going to suck. But again, they got Pat White, and they got some other people that used to play for them back there. So that could be cool. He'll undoubtedly be one of the most entertaining coaches in the conference. But West Virginia, Geno Smith is not walking through that door. Houston, Willie Fritz got his jump up job on Tulane, I believe. Connor Whiteman, former 5-star A&M. I actually liked Whiteman at A&M. He couldn't stay healthy. He had some flashes. I think he's a really good thrower of the football. If he hits, they'll probably pull an upset or 2. But yeah, they just don't have the depth or the identity to really compete yet. Arizona, again, Noah Fafita, He'll probably keep them in some games, but it's just it's only a damn shame what Kevin Sumlin did to that program. UCF, Scott Frost, welcome back as well. And then Cincinnati, I have to touch on them too. Brendan Sorsby, actually a decent quarterback in the conference. Dante Corleone, a big dog in the trenches as well, probably an NFL defensive tackle at some point. But yeah, in terms of conference impact, minimal. And I've already probably went too long in this video. Guys, you should know. David Bailey, edge rusher transfer from Stanford to Texas Tech, 14 and a half sacks in his career. A guy that could be a day 2, day 1 pick. One of the most technically refined pass rushers in college football. He part of the crown jewel of that Texas Tech portal class. I think there's a guy that he is, Jacob Rodriguez is the preseason Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. I think that Bailey has a chance to be probably the best pass rusher in the conference, honestly. And if you could put a defense behind that Texas Tech air raid and Borden and all those guys, it could be something. And he'll be rushing alongside Romello Height, a guy coming from Georgia Tech. He's well-traveled as well. He'll be his fourth school. At the age of college football, it is what it is. But yeah, I think that Texas Tech, we talk about them being one of the most down programs in college football, and it's in the state of Texas. They're really starting to put together some pieces on the defensive side of the ball to compete, and I think that these two guys will be pillars of that. Jaheim Oates, Colorado. I didn't touch on Colorado either. Colorado, real quick, I think Caden Salter will be the starter. We think that Julian Lewis is probably the quarterback of the future. If he can start over Caden Salter, a guy that our man Vince Law is pretty high on, I think that's pretty indicative of how cold he will be. I just think they have just too much to replace there. I mean, obviously the depth wasn't there. But Jaheim Oates is a guy that can be a foundational guy in the middle of that defense for them. Honestly, a guy in terms of like trench depth, something that they didn't have last year that they'll have, at least with him this year. But that'll be a guy that coming in from Alabama to Colorado. That could be a guy that probably hear his name drafted. And yeah, if some of the pieces around Colorado can surprise you, he could be all conference, and Colorado could surprise people because they have a really dynamic 1-2 punch with the Miller brothers. They're not brothers, but they brothers. Draylen and Omarion Miller. If I had to predict the conference championship, Arizona State and Baylor. I'll be biased. I think Sawyer Robertson combines consistency with talent enough. I think Arizona State probably has I think Jordan Tice, again, the best receiver in the country that doesn't live in Columbus, Ohio. Texas Tech, I think they'll probably be the most talented, but I think they had another year to go in terms of really embedding this process of just buying the best team that money can buy. And the Quentin Jordan injury really hurts them. Really, really hurts them. So my conference championship game will be Arizona State and Baylor. Man, I feel like it'll be tough to go back to back. But I think let me not let my bias show too much. Arizona State, that's how I predicted my conference champion. So yeah, that is my Big 12 conference preview. If I missed something, it's my show. It's not yours, but let me know in the comments. Yeah, appreciate y'all. We're glad that college football is back. We got some more content coming y'all's way.